So I want to talk about Dan Savage again. Now, I'm going to be critical of him in this video, but he is someone who is a popular LGBTQ columnist, and he also is the person who founded the It Gets Better project. So even though I'm going to kind of object to some of the things that he says in this video, just know that I'm actually a really big fan of Dan Savage, and when you look at the other video where I criticize Dan Savage, I don't want you to get the impression that I think he's a bad person, and that he's a bad guy. I mean, if you listen to this clip I'm going to play for you in a bit, you'll get the impression that he's really pretentious and whatnot, but I mean, this is kind of just his shtick. Like, he's really into shock humor and stuff like that, and it's very entertaining, but at the same time, he is wrong here. So in this clip I'll play for you, he talks about the Green Party, and he has a really strong criticism for them and why they can't succeed. So with that being said, there is a lot of profanity in this video, so I won't censor it, but just be wary that if you're listening at work, not safe for work. So I will play that for you, and then we will come back and talk about the Green Party's response.
Yeah, let's talk about the Green Party for just a moment, or third parties, getting a third party movement off the ground here in this country, because we are sick of the two-party system. Here's how you fucking do that. You run people not just for fucking president every 4 fucking years. I have a problem with the Greens. I have a problem with the Libertarians. I have a problem with these fake attention-seeking, grandstanding Green/Libertarian Party candidates who pop up every 4 years like mushrooms in shit, saying that they're building a third party. And those of us who don't have a home in the Republican Party, don't have a home in the Democratic Party, can't get behind every Democratic position or Republican position, should gravitate toward these third parties and help build a third party movement by every 4 fucking years voting for one of these assholes like Jill fucking Stein, who I'm sure is a lovely person. She's only an asshole in this aspect. If you are interested in building a third party, a viable third party, you don't start with president. You don't start by running someone for fucking president. Where are the Green Party candidates for city councils, for county councils, for state legislatures, for state assessor, for state insurance commissioner, for governor, for fucking dog catcher? I would be so willing to vote for Green Party candidates who are starting at the bottom, grassroots, bottom up, building a third party, a viable third party. You don't do that by trotting out the reanimated corpse of Ralph fucking Nader every 4 fucking years. Or his doppelganger, whoever it is now, Jill Stein, and some asshole to be named 4 years from now. You start by running grassroots local campaigns. And there have been, and I'm sure we're going to hear from lots of people out there listening, there have been a couple of Green Party candidates who've run in other races here and there across the country, but no sustained effort to build a Green Party nationally. Just this griping, bullshitty, grandstanding, fault-finding, purity testing, holier than thouing that we are all subjected to every 4 fucking years by the Green Party candidate. And the folks, including you, caller, and I love you and I respect you, and we're having this debate, and I'm not treating you with kid gloves because I respect you, who are fooled by them, who are sucked into this bullshit, who are tricked by these grandstanding, attention-seeking, bullshit-spewing charlatans into wasting your vote, which is what you are going to do. I'm sorry to say, to circle back to the top of your call, you are essentially, if you're voting for Jill Stein, helping to potentially elect Donald J. Trump, president of these United States, which would be a catastrophe, which is what some people say that they want. People supported Ralph Nader in 2000 and said there was no difference between Al Gore and George W. Bush. Therefore, we could all afford to throw our votes away protest style on Ralph Nader, who had no hope of getting elected, because there was no difference between Bush and Gore. These same people at the same time said that George Bush was so manifestly, obviously terrible that he would bring the revolution if he got himself elected somehow. They didn't say that about Gore. He wouldn't bring the revolution. They're exactly the same, exactly as awful, but one would bring the revolution and one wouldn't, which means they weren't exactly the same and they weren't equally awful. And we're hearing the same thing now about Hillary and Donald. That they're both equally awful, they're both equally terrible, corrupt two-party system, fuck it, fuck it, fuck it. Fuck them both, fuck both their houses, vote for Jill Stein. And if Donald should get elected, oh, he's so terrible, so much worse than the equally awful Hillary Clinton. that his election will bring the revolution. It's bullshit.
So there's more to that, but in summary, he's arguing that they're going about building a viable national third party all wrong. If you want to do that, you've got to start at the bottom, not the top. Start running more candidates in local and state elections. Now, the national co-chair of the Green Party responded to this in an op-ed for the Huffington Post. She states, first, the Green Party actually does run candidates from dog catcher on up. Some former elected officials include Michael Feinstein, mayor of Santa Monica, California, and myself, Denver's first green registered elected official. Readers can find even more names at our database. So you see, Savage's assertion that we don't run candidates in other tiers is incorrect, and perhaps he didn't notice the 2014 campaigns for Congress, State Representative, Public Utility District, and Charter Review Commission in Washington State. It doesn't appear that Savage is aware of the incredible advantage that the duopoly parties have in automatic ballot access, as opposed to the massive injustice that third parties face. In states like Illinois, having a presidential candidate is a requirement for winning major party status, without which an alternative party has no future. In other states, a presidential candidate helps bring attention to the campaign to gather petition signatures to run any candidate as a green. Now, she also addresses the 2000 election, which is what Dan Savage brought up, and talks about how Ralph Nader only drew in 24,000 votes from Democratic voters, and that they got a lot of votes from registered Green Party members. And he fails to talk about how 300,000 Democrats switched and voted for George Bush. So I think she rightfully points out that it's unfair to criticize the Green Party. Now, she also adds, when we in the Green Party hear about spoiler candidates, it usually comes from people who believe that the Democratic Party is entitled to votes without actually doing the work of the people. We are expected to faithfully fall in line without any perceivable return on investment. So overall, although I respect the work of Dan Savage, I do disagree with his criticism of the Green Party, although there is a kernel of truth to the fact that they don't run Green Party candidates in every local election, but this isn't necessarily because they don't want to. It all comes down to ballot access. Furthermore, he has a fundamental misunderstanding of how you actually build a viable third party. If you want more than two parties, you've got to fight for electoral reform, because without it, our majoritarian electoral system will continue to push us into a system where we have a duopoly of parties. Even if it is the case that the Green Party becomes a successful, nationally, electorally viable political party, that doesn't just mean that we're going to have three major parties. That would most likely mean that their success is contingent on the failure of another party. So the Green Party or the Libertarian Party would likely reemerge as a replacement to the collapse of either the Republicans or the Democrats. And the problem is that even if that is the case, well, both parties will change dramatically. So let's say, hypothetically speaking, that the Republican Party, they continue down this path and they end up collapsing because they don't appeal to voters anymore. And the Green Party emerges as the new big party, and the Democrats are now the conservative party. Well, they're not just going to remain the same. What's going to happen is the Democratic Party will move significantly to the right to make up ground and capture the Republican voters that they lost once the party collapsed. And what would Green Party do? They would have to move towards the center to capture Democratic voters. And sooner but later, guess what's going to happen? We have two shitty parties again. We're stuck in the two-party nightmare. So unless you actually fight for real electoral reform, you will never get the result you're looking for. So what we actually need is electoral reform. We need to switch from a majoritarian to a proportional representation system, and that will allow for more political parties to exist. And when you have more political parties to exist, if you have at least two on each side, left and the right, well, the further left party will keep the centrist party in check. So if we had the Green Party, they'd keep the Democrats from moving past the center line. So, I mean, it's a good check on power. It makes them more competitive, and it makes them really want to appeal to voters more. But since you have two parties, one of which, the Republicans, are just completely off the spectrum now, well, the Democratic Party has a lot more wiggle room, and they could basically snub their own base, and they could appeal to their donors and do what they want because, well, the other party is so crazy that they're almost not viable anymore. So Dan Savage is wrong to imply that building a viable third party is as easy as running candidates in local elections, because the Green Party, they have been doing that for decades now. It's just that it's really difficult to do that if you don't have equal ballot access. And furthermore, another issue is lack of federal funds. So because the Green Party doesn't have federal funding like the Democrats and Republicans, well, how are you going to run candidates in literally every single race in the country. There are thousands and thousands, so you just can't afford it. What money they have is raised from individual donors who donate on the Green Party's website. They don't have the funds to do this, so if they reach a certain percentage in votes, then they can secure federal funding. That's why many people want to vote for them. Now, Dan Savage also said that you are wasting your vote if you vote for Jill Stein. So this is a really deceptive saying that many people like to use against Jill Stein supporters when they won't fall in line. It's intellectually dishonest, and it disregards the variation across the country. So a vote for Jill Stein is no more wasted than a vote for a Republican in a deep blue state. So for example, for me as a voter in Oregon, if I decided I wanted to vote for Donald Trump, that would be a wasted vote, because do you know how many electoral votes Donald Trump will win in Oregon, a deep blue state? 0. It is winner take all in terms of electoral votes here, so he will get 0 electoral votes. Hillary Clinton will get them all. So effectively, my vote for Donald Trump wouldn't even count. So to say that a vote for Jill Stein is a wasted vote, or it's a vote for Trump, well, it's misleading because it disregards the huge amount of variation we have across the country. That will vary depending on your state. Now, furthermore, when you think about it as a protest vote, it really isn't a wasted vote, because the larger the vote percentage that the Green Party gets, well, the bigger the force they'll actually become in American politics. And even if they can't win, well, they'll become such a big force that they'll pull enough votes from the Democrats that they'll start to realize, maybe we need to pay attention to the Green Party. Maybe we actually need to start moving back to the left because we're losing so many voters to them. So it's not a wasted vote. It's a protest vote that is strategic in many ways, and it's also a sincere vote because you're picking the candidate who you sincerely agree with more, not voting for the lesser of two evils. And it's sad that 80% of voters that are voting for Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are literally voting because they are wanting to prevent the other candidate from winning. So almost all of the country is voting for the lesser of two evils. If you're voting for third party and you're voting for someone who you legitimately support and agree with more, I wouldn't call that a wasted vote. Even if you do get electoral reform, you may not get the result that you want, and it's very complex, it's convoluted, it's difficult to understand. I mean, Japan is an example. They had one party for decades, and then they actually did electoral reform, and then what happened was they got a new party that won, and then the next election cycle they lost, and now they're back to one party basically. So you really have to be smart, and you have to realize the dynamics of different electoral institutions and how they really do play a role in determining the number of political parties that you have in the country. Political competition will be conducive to better representation. If we get electoral reform and we have more than 2 electorally viable parties, well, then they'll have to represent us. They can't just represent their donors because that would threaten their power. But in the end, I think that Dan Savage doesn't understand how you get more than 2 parties. He doesn't understand that the Green Party actually is running local candidates, and that, you know, it's an issue of logistics. They're not choosing to refrain from running third-party candidates or Green Party candidates in local elections because they want to. It's because that's really difficult to do so without ballot access, without federal funding. It's difficult to do so in our majoritarian electoral system. So the main takeaway I want everyone to have is that electoral reform, that needs to be as important as getting money out of politics. Like, we have Wolfpack. I think we need a separate Wolfpack just to get electoral reform. We need a proportional representation system. If we could just copy and paste the German electoral system into America, I think that would be fantastic, because they have about 5 electorally viable parties. But yet, their proportional system, it's not proportional enough to allow crazy people to get in. So I love the German electoral system. You choose not just the candidate, but you choose between parties as well. We got to do something, because if we don't get real electoral reform, it doesn't matter how good the Green Party and the Libertarian Party does. We'll almost always come back down to a 2-party system at the end of the day. And that's not me, trying to be pessimistic. That's just me stating the reality of our unfair electoral system.